Hi there, my name is Paul Rosen. I'm an assistant professor in computer science and engineering department, and today I'm going to be talking about using peer feedback in STEM courses. So peer feedback is something that we in STEM fields traditionally think of as something for the arts fields to use. In particular, they have this situation where so many of their assignments are difficult to grade objectively, and so peer feedback fits in really well with those types of assignments, giving multi-point feedback to the student. However, with a little bit of creativity, we in STEM can also take advantage of this active learning tool in order to improve student experience and help to keep them engaged. Now, one of the rules of thumb that I try to use when I'm deciding whether or not to use peer feedback is pretty simple. If I sit back with my assignments and I look at it and I think to myself, this is going to take a really long time to grade this assignment and give students sufficient feedback, then I know that the assignment is at least a candidate for using peer feedback mechanism. So very briefly, peer feedback does have a few advantages for you as far as an active learning technique is concerned. In particular, it really helps to engage students in the course content, and it engages them by reinforcing the course content. So what I mean by that is traditionally you would give an assignment, students would complete that assignment, and in my experience, they would forget the content until it's test time. With peer feedback, students do the assignment, they submit the assignment, but they can't forget about it because they have to go and do some sort of peer feedback process. So it forces them to engage with the content one more time. It's a pretty low level of engagement. That is, it doesn't require them to think super deeply about the topic, but it does force them to revisit the topic one additional time, and then they can forget it until the test. One interesting thing that we've found in some of our work, we've actually done research on using peer review in visualization courses, is that students find actually sort of moderate utility in the feedback they receive, but they find pretty high utility in the process of giving feedback. They found it to be more helpful to their work to give feedback than it was to receive feedback. So feedback in and of itself isn't necessarily helpful. It's the process of giving the feedback that helps to improve the student's experience. So with the remainder of my time, I'm going to just briefly discuss three potential platforms for giving peer feedback. The first two are general peer feedback environments, Canvas and Kritik. And then the last one is really specific to computer science or any other programming type of course where we're actually going to be using the Git source repository system. So each of these has advantages and disadvantages. The first platform is Canvas, which is the learning management system we already use. So the advantage there is that we're already using it. You just have to click a few extra buttons and you're off to the races using peer feedback. It has no additional cost to you or to the students, no financial cost. It has extra time investment, but no financial cost. And the big negative, in my opinion, is that the interface isn't very good. It's very limited in its capabilities. Kritik is a standalone application for doing peer feedback or peer review. It's a very good interface. It's nice. It's clean. It works really well. It's got a lot of options, but it has some significant downsides. The first one is that it's not at all linked to our learning management system. The assignments on Kritik have to be downloaded. The gradebook on Kritik has to be downloaded and uploaded to Canvas, which is an extra bit of burden. Plus, it's a completely separate website that the students have to deal with. The other problem is that it has a high cost. It's approximately $20 per student, which has to be a cost that has to be borne by either the students directly or indirectly. And then the last platform, again, is for software development, is GitHub, and it really only supports software development. So I'll briefly mention that just to cover my bases. So I'll give you a brief tour of these different platforms so that you at least know what they look like. So the first one is Canvas. So we've all seen Canvas before. Getting peer review or peer feedback involved is pretty simple process. When you create an assignment, we can, of course, name the assignment, and we have selected some submission types. And then as you scroll down, normally it's going to look like this, where you're going to have this little section that says peer reviews, and there's a checkbox for require peer reviews. Peer review and peer feedback are going to be the same thing in this context. So when you click that on, it gives you two different options for assigning peer reviews. So what we're talking about here is who is going to give the review, or who's going to give the feedback. You can do this manually if you want to. That is, you can pick which students review which other students' work, or you can have Canvas automatically assign those reviews. If you choose to automatically assign those reviews, you select how many reviews you want and when you want it to make those assignments for you. And then it also gives you the option to make peer reviews anonymous or not. So that's all it takes to enable peer feedback in Canvas. So as I said, pretty easy to do, but there weren't that many options available to you. The last thing you want to do when you're using peer feedback, or you may want to do when you're using peer feedback, is add a rubric. By default, if you don't have a rubric, all the feedback's going to go into one big text box, so the students just have to type into a text box. If you want to have more structured feedback, you can use a rubric, and so this is the rubric mechanism that you may have used before in your previous classes. You establish a set of criteria, different rankings, different point values for those different rankings, and it allows the students to give both numeric feedback as well as giving text-based feedback. Text-based feedback being writing free-form comments. So, and then you create the rubric, and then when the students are doing the peer review on their interface, they'll actually see the different rubric categories, and they can fill in their opinion about various aspects of how the student they're reviewing actually did. The next platform is Kritik. So with Kritik, you can go onto their website. It's app.kritik.io, and you can create an instructor account. Instructor accounts are free, and when you get into the instructor account, you can go ahead and you can create a new course. It's going to initially have no courses for you. You'll create a new one, and this is going to be a wrapper for all of the assignments that you use in your class. So you give the course a name, and then you set up a grading scheme. So you have a uniform grading scheme for everything that you're going to be having peer feedback on. And basically the grading scheme breaks things down into three different categories. The creation score, this is what we would traditionally give credit for on an assignment. So what we would traditionally give 0 to 100% on is the creation score. It's the actual quality of the work that they did. The Kritik score has to do with giving the students the opportunity to grade in their feedback. So the feedback has a grade associated with it, and in this case, 40% of the grade is given by that. Personally, I don't like this option, but that's up to you if you want to use that feedback, that peer-related grade. And then finally, there's a participation score, so they get some points just for submitting their peer feedback. So that it's not an obligation without some benefit to them. This, I in particular like to use these participation type scores. So after that, you create the course. You can go into the course, and they call assignments activities in here. So you can create a new activity. You can give it a title. And as you scroll down, you can fill in the things you normally fill in, objectives, instructions, any external files that they might need. And then you see this big rubric right here. They have a lot of pre-made rubrics. They have a number of pre-made rubrics, and you can see the rubrics are much more detailed and much more flexible, I would say, than the rubrics that are available via Canvas. And so this establishes your set of criteria that you want the peer evaluation to work on, and then there are some other options down here. And once you're happy with the options, you can create the activity, and now you have your activity that students can go ahead and they can provide feedback to. Inside of the activity itself, you have a little bit more information. You can, of course, still see the rubric. They give you overall scores, so you can see if in one of these particular rubric categories, if students are underachieving, you're going to see a lower score in that particular category. So let's say everybody's struggling on scope. Scope's going to have perhaps 1 or 2 stars, and and then you know as the instructor to go back and make sure that students understand, first of all, what scope they're supposed to be hitting, make sure it's not a problem with your assignment, and make sure also that it's not a problem with their understanding of the concepts in the course. And then over here, you have a nice little schedule where you can see when the assignment's due, when the peer reviews are assigned, and then when the peer reviews are actually due to be turned back into the instructor. Okay, so that's the quick on Kritik. These guys will give you live demos. They have a button on their homepage. Just click on it and send a request in, and they'll live demo it for you, and you can talk to them about options of trying it out in your course. I should also mention that in Canvas there are a number of web resources for it. So if you're considering using it, you can Google that, and you'll find plenty of resources on it with more detail. So the last one I'll point to is the GitHub platform. I want to show you the GitHub platform, but what I will do is I will just mention how this process works. So for those familiar with Git and with GitHub, this will make sense. Everyone else, you can just ignore this portion. So essentially what you're going to be doing is every student's going to submit their assignment as a GitHub repository. So you can they'll create a repository. Once they've created that repository and the deadline is passed, the students who are supposed to be doing the reviews are going to fork that submission. So they're going to fork all the source code. The student giving the peer feedback is then going to go directly into the source code, and they're going to provide their feedback in the source code itself. Once they're done providing all that feedback, they're going to issue a pull request to the original student, and then the student's going to be able to go on GitHub. They're going to see their list of pull requests, and so they'll be able to see the feedback that they've received from the other students. They don't have to accept the pull requests. The pull requests are there for them to observe. They can reject them all, but at least they have the feedback there in the pull requests that they can then action on. And of course, if you want to do this with more than one student, you just repeat the process. Every student who's giving feedback just forks the submission and issues a pull request when they're done giving their feedback. Okay, so just to wrap it up, please try using peer feedback. I think we should do more of this in STEM courses. I think we would find a much higher level of engagement from our students if we use this more widely. Now, I will note that there is some increased administrative efforts associated with using peer feedback. It's not a free lunch, but at the same time, I've found that it reduces the amount of feedback I have to give to students in their assignments. So, we spend more of our grading time focusing on the numeric score and less of it on the feedback, because we know that students are going to get much more feedback from their peers just because of the amount of time that their peers are able to put into it. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Otherwise, thanks for watching.